For years, people called us the perfect couple. We met in our early 20s, both fresh out of university, both carrying nothing but ambition and the quiet hope that maybe, if we worked hard enough, life would turn out the way we imagined. He was studying engineering at the time, and I was finishing my degree in education. We didn't have money. We didn't have connections. What we had was a shared belief that if we held on to each other, nothing else really mattered. We didn't argue much. When we disagreed, it was the kind of disagreement that ended with one of us laughing and the other pretending to be annoyed. We supported each other through job rejections, through the death of his grandfather, through the long nights when I questioned whether I had chosen the right path. We built everything together from nothing: a small apartment with mismatched furniture, careers that grew slowly but steadily, a life that felt like ours in a way nothing before it ever had. If you had asked me back then what love looked like, I wouldn't have hesitated. I would have said his name without needing to think. I would have described the way he made coffee in the morning, the way he hummed off-key when he thought no one was listening, the way his hand found mine in the dark without either of us consciously reaching. We were the couple that other couples compared themselves to, the one that looked effortless from the outside. The only thing we didn't have was a child. At first, we didn't worry. We were young. We had time. There was no rush to add to a life that already felt full. "Let's just give it time," he used to say, kissing my forehead like everything in the world could be solved with patience. And I believed him. I believed that our story, which had gone so smoothly in every other way, would unfold exactly as it was supposed to. But time passed. Months turned into years. The careful optimism we had cultivated began to wear thin around the edges. Friends announced pregnancies with casual joy that felt, to us, like small detonations. Family gatherings came with questions disguised as concern. "Are you thinking about having children? You're not getting any younger, you know. Maybe you're trying too hard." We smiled. We made excuses. We went home and sat in silence that wasn't comfortable anymore. The silence turned into pressure, the kind that doesn't announce itself but seeps into everything. It was in the way we avoided certain topics, in the careful dance of not asking, not hoping too loudly, not letting the disappointment show. It was in the conversations we had with our bodies in the dark, wondering why something so natural for everyone else felt impossible for us. Hospitals became part of our routine. First one, then another, then a specialist recommended by a specialist recommended by someone who knew someone who had been through something similar. Tests that left bruises. Appointments that consumed entire afternoons. Waiting rooms that all smelled the same, antiseptic and quiet desperation, the particular silence of people holding their breath while the world decided whether to be kind to them. We learned the language of infertility without meaning to. Ovulation windows. Follicle counts, hormone levels, the clinical vocabulary of a problem that felt anything but clinical. Until one day, after months of tests and appointments and waiting, the doctor finally said the words that would change everything. "The issue isn't with you." I remember looking at him, just for a second, a single moment in which everything we had built together seemed to hang in the balance. He didn't say anything. He just stared at the floor, his hands clenched so tightly in his lap that his knuckles had gone white. The doctor continued speaking, explaining, offering options and hope wrapped in medical terminology, but neither of us was listening anymore. That night, he didn't sleep. I lay beside him, feeling the tension radiating from his body, wanting to reach for him, but not knowing how to cross the distance that had appeared between us. But the next morning he smiled. "We'll fix it," he said. And we tried. God, we tried. The treatments began almost immediately. Injections I had to learn to administer myself because the appointments were too frequent and the pharmacy too far, and the bills too high to add anything more to the weight we were already carrying. Procedures that left me exhausted and him guilty. Schedules dictated by calendars and charts, and the relentless demands of bodies that wouldn't cooperate. It drained not only our savings, every penny we had carefully saved over years of careful planning, but pieces of us we didn't even realize we were losing. I stopped answering calls from friends because I couldn't explain one more time why we couldn't make plans. He threw himself into work with an intensity that left no room for anything else. We existed in parallel orbits, circling the same problem but never quite meeting. There were days I cried in the bathroom so he wouldn't see me, pressing my hand against my mouth to muffle the sound, not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't want to add my pain to his. And days he stayed up late pretending to work, the glow of his laptop the only light in the room, just so I wouldn't see him break. But through all of it, he never let go of my hand. In the waiting rooms, before procedures, in the quiet moments between cycles of hope and disappointment, his hand was always there. Sometimes squeezing too tight, sometimes barely holding on, but always present. Until one day, it worked. I remember staring at the pregnancy test on the bathroom counter, watching the lines appear, not believing what I was seeing. I took another, then another. Each one confirmed what I had stopped letting myself hope for. I was pregnant. I still remember the way he looked at me when I showed him the results. His face went through so many emotions in the span of a few seconds: disbelief, confusion, joy so pure it looked like pain. Like the world had finally, after all those years, decided to be kind to us. He laughed. He cried. He held me so tightly I could barely breathe, his arms wrapped around me like he was afraid I might disappear if he let go. "We did it," he whispered into my hair. And for a while, everything felt worth it. The years of waiting, the treatments, the silent nights, all of it faded into the background of this new, impossible reality. The pregnancy was peaceful. Something shifted in him during those months. The tension that had been living in his shoulders for years seemed to ease. He took care of me in ways I didn't even know I needed, ways I hadn't let myself need before because needing felt too dangerous when the outcome was uncertain. He cooked meals I craved before I could ask for them. He tracked my medications with a spreadsheet that would have embarrassed me if it hadn't touched me so deeply. He talked to my belly every night, his voice low and warm, telling our daughter stories about the life we would build for her. "She's going to have your eyes," he used to say, resting his cheek against my growing stomach. I would smile, my hand in his hair, and let myself believe him. We painted the nursery a soft yellow. We argued about names for weeks before settling on one that meant light. We assembled a crib together, bickering over the instructions in the way that couples do when the stakes feel both enormous and insignificant. For those 9 months, I let myself imagine a future where everything worked out, where the years of struggle became a story we told, not a wound that defined us. Until the day she was born. The room was bright, colder than I expected, loud with voices and instructions I could barely process through the pain that had been building for hours. Machines beeped. Nurses moved around me with practiced efficiency. The doctor's face appeared above me, calm and professional, saying words I couldn't quite hear over the roaring in my ears. And then, a cry. Soft, fragile, but unmistakably real. The sound of new life in a world that suddenly felt sharper, more vivid, more important than it had a moment before. "Our baby," I whispered. They placed her in my arms, still wet, still crying, still the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Her tiny fingers curled against my skin. Her face, scrunched and red, the face I had been waiting to see for longer than I knew how to measure. And for a moment, nothing else existed. Not the years of waiting. Not the pain that still pulsed through my exhausted body. Not the fear that had lived in my chest for so long I had forgotten what silence felt like. Just her. Perfect. Here. Real. But then I looked up and saw him, standing there, frozen. His face was pale. Not the pale of exhaustion or emotion, but something deeper. Something that looked like the ground had shifted beneath him, and he was still falling. Confused. No, not confused. Something worse. "Do you see it?" he said quietly. I frowned slightly, still weak, still trembling, still trying to understand what was happening. "See what?" He didn't answer. He just kept staring at her. At her hair. At her eyes. Our daughter had the softest, almost silver blonde hair. Fine as sponge sugar, catching the harsh hospital light in a way that made it look almost translucent. And when she opened her eyes for a brief second, those first, unfocused moments of new sight, they were blue. Not brown like mine. Not brown like his.
Blue.
A very clear, unmistakable blue. The kind of blue that appears in newborns sometimes, before the true color settles in, before melanin does its work. I knew this. I had read about it. I had been told, in those countless appointments and prenatal classes, that babies' eyes often change color in the first year. But he didn't know. Or maybe he did, and it didn't matter. Because in that moment, something had already shifted in him. Something I couldn't name or reach or fix. I felt the shift instantly. Like something invisible had broken between us, a thread that had held us together through everything, now frayed beyond repair. The days in the hospital were strange.
Cold.
He was there. He came every day, sat in the chair by the window, stayed for the required hours. But he wasn't really there. Not the way he had been through the pregnancy, through the years of treatment, through everything we had survived together. He didn't hold her. When the nurses offered, when I asked, he made excuses. His hands were full. He was about to leave. Maybe later. He didn't speak much. His answers were short. His eyes were somewhere else, distant, focused on something I couldn't see, something that wasn't in that room with us. He didn't even look at me the same way. When he thought I wasn't watching, I caught him staring at our daughter with an expression I couldn't name. Not anger. Not disappointment. Something more complicated. Something that looked like grief. Every time I tried to talk, he would nod, but his eyes were far away. Somewhere I couldn't reach. I was exhausted. In pain. My body felt like it wasn't mine anymore. This body that had carried her for 9 months, that had endured so much to bring her into the world, that was now healing in ways that hurt as much as the labor had. And yet, I kept telling myself the same thing I had told myself through all the years of waiting, through all the treatments, through all the nights I cried alone, so he wouldn't see. He just needs time. This is a shock. It's overwhelming. Everything we've been through, everything we've waited for, of course it's a lot to process. He'll come around. He always does. But he didn't. When we were finally discharged and got home, I barely made it to the couch before he spoke. We need to do a DNA test. I thought I had misheard him. The words didn't make sense. They didn't fit into any possible reality I had imagined for this moment. Bringing our daughter home, finally, after everything. What? His voice was firm. The kind of firm that had carried us through job interviews and difficult conversations and the hard decisions of building a life together. But this was different. This firmness was pointed at me. I need to be sure. Something inside me cracked. I had just given birth. My body still hurt in ways I couldn't fully articulate. My mind was barely holding together under the weight of hormones and exhaustion and the enormous, terrifying responsibility of caring for a newborn. I hadn't slept more than 2 hours at a time in days. I was bleeding. I was leaking. I was learning how to be a mother in the middle of all this. And that was the first thing he said to me as we walked into our home. "You think I cheated?" I asked, my voice shaking despite my efforts to study it. "I don't know what to think," he replied. That was worse. Much worse. Because if he had accused me outright, if he had shouted, if he had shown anger, I would have known how to respond. I would have known where we stood. But this quiet uncertainty, this willingness to believe the worst without evidence, without reason, without any of the years we had spent building trust between us, it was devastating. The argument that followed wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Every word felt heavier than the last, each one landing somewhere inside me and staying there. I never. Then prove it, he cut me off. Prove it. Like I was on trial. Like everything we had built together, the marriage, the years, the child we had fought so hard to bring into the world, meant nothing. Like all those years could be erased by the color of a baby's eyes. Eyes that would probably change in a few months anyway. Eyes that meant nothing except that newborns sometimes have blue eyes. I don't even remember when he left that night. Just the sound of the door closing. And the silence that followed. The heavy, crushing silence of being alone in a house that had always felt like ours. Hours later, my phone rang. His mother. "I heard what happened," she said coldly. Of course she had. He had called her. Probably before he even left. Probably from the car. And whatever he had told her, Whatever version of events he had presented, it had already been decided that I was the one in the wrong. I suggest you take the test as soon as possible. I closed my eyes, leaning my head back against the couch. Our daughter was asleep in her bassinet beside me, her tiny chest rising and falling with each breath, completely unaware of the world she had been born into. I just gave birth, I said. My voice was barely a whisper. And if the result is negative, she continued, ignoring me completely, her voice clipped and efficient, you should prepare yourself. You won't leave this family with anything. Not a single word of concern. Not for me. Not for the baby. Not for the years I had been part of their family, the holidays spent together, the care I had shown her son, the grandchildren she had been waiting for. Just judgment. Pressure. Accusation. When the call ended, I just sat there, holding my daughter, rocking slowly, too tired to cry, too empty to feel anything except the dull, persistent ache of something I couldn't name. My sister arrived 2 days later. She came from another country, as soon as she heard. I hadn't told her what was happening. I hadn't told anyone, but the way these things work, the way news travels through families, she had heard enough to know she needed to come. And when she saw me, standing in the doorway of my own home with our daughter in my arms, looking at her like I wasn't sure who she was at first, she didn't ask questions. She just hugged me. And for the first time since everything happened, since the hospital, since the accusation, since the door closed and the silence descended, I broke. I don't know how long we stood there. Long enough for her to take the baby from my arms, to guide me to the couch, to wrap a blanket around my shoulders like I was the one who needed to be swaddled. Long enough for all the tears I had been holding back to finally come, the kind of crying that comes from somewhere deeper than sadness, somewhere that has been waiting for permission to grieve. She helped me with everything. The baby, the house, even reminding me to eat when I forgot, putting plates in front of me and sitting with me until I took a bite. Because pain isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just emptiness. The absence of the things that used to fill your days, your thoughts, your sense of who you are. Days passed. The test was done. I didn't fight it. Not because I agreed, not because I thought I had anything to prove, but because I didn't have the strength to argue anymore. And deep down, I knew the truth. I had never betrayed him. Not once. Not for a moment. Through everything, he had been the only person I wanted. The day the results arrived, they were all there. Him, his parents, sitting in my living room like it was a courtroom, like they were about to witness something important. His mother had her handbag in her lap, her posture rigid, her expression already preparing for whatever outcome she had already decided was coming. His father stood by the window, looking uncomfortable, looking anywhere but at me. I walked in slowly, holding my daughter close, my body still weak, my mind somewhere distant, protected by a layer of numbness I had learned to wrap around myself. He opened the envelope. His hands trembled slightly. The room was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking in the kitchen, the one we had bought together at a flea market years ago, the one that had always marked time in our home. Then silence.
Long.
Heavy. It's positive, he said. Of course it was. No one spoke. Not immediately. His mother's face shifted through expressions too quickly to track. His father let out a breath he had been holding since he walked in. And then I saw it. Regret. It spread across his face slowly, like he was finally realizing what he had done. The magnitude of it. The irreversibility of it. He stepped toward me. I'm sorry, he said softly. Too softly. Too late. I don't know what came over me. He reached out. Not to me.
To her.
Our daughter. And that's when something inside me reacted before I could even think. A primal, instinctive movement, older than reason, older than love. I stepped back. Not dramatically. Not consciously. Just away. Creating distance between him and her. Between him and us. Like he was something dangerous. Something that didn't belong near us anymore. The room went silent again. I knew, somewhere beneath the instinct, that it wasn't right. I knew he was her father. I knew the law, the expectations, the obligations. That I couldn't take that away from him, no matter what had happened. But my body, my heart, they didn't listen to logic anymore. Because in the moment I needed him the most, after years of trying, after treatments that broke us both, after the physical ordeal of bringing our daughter into the world, he chose doubt. He chose suspicion. He chose to leave. To call his mother before he called me. To treat our child like a problem that needed to be solved rather than a miracle that had finally arrived. And that kind of absence, it changes something in you. Something that doesn't come back. The days after that were complicated. He tried. He really did. He came by with gifts for the baby, with apologies that grew more desperate each time. He sat on the porch when I wouldn't let him inside. He called when I didn't answer. He sent messages that started with, "I understand if you need space," and ended with, please let me make this right." But every time he stood too close, every time I saw his face, I felt that same instinct. Distance. Cold. Like something had already ended, and neither of us wanted to say it out loud. Until one night, I finally did. "I want a divorce." He froze. "What?" "I can't forget what you did." My voice was calm. Not angry. Not loud. Just certain. The kind of certainty that comes from being broken open and finding, underneath all the pain, something that knows exactly what it needs. "You left me when I needed you the most," I continued. "I was in pain. I was exhausted. I had just given birth to our child, and you made me feel like I was alone, like I had done something wrong, like I had to prove to you that I was still the person you married." I said, "I'm sorry." "I know," I interrupted gently. "And I believe you." That seemed to hurt him more. His face crumpled in a way I had never seen before. But that doesn't change anything. Silence filled the space between us. The same silence that had been growing for weeks, months, maybe longer. The silence that had started in waiting rooms and testing centers and sleepless nights, that had grown with each treatment and each disappointment, that had finally spoken. "I don't want my daughter growing up in a house where her mother resents her father," I said quietly, because that was the truth. I knew myself. I knew the shape of my own heart, what it could forgive and what it couldn't. And I knew that if I stayed, if I tried to rebuild what had been broken, the resentment would grow. It would poison everything. It would become the story of our marriage, the thing our daughter learned about love by watching us. And that, more than anything else, was what I couldn't allow. "I won't be able to forget this," I said. He lowered his head, and for the first time I saw him break. Not out of anger, not out of pride, but out of regret. Real regret. The kind that settles into your bones and stays there, the kind that can't be fixed with apologies or promises or time. The divorce went through. It was quieter than I expected. Paperwork. Signatures. The careful division of years that had been built together. I kept the house. He kept his car. We agreed on everything without fighting, because fighting would have required something we no longer had between us. He still sees her. He's a good father now. Careful. Gentle. Present. He comes for weekends. He calls every night. He shows up for school events and doctor's appointments and all the small, ordinary moments that make up a childhood. Maybe even more present than he was before. I watch him with her sometimes, and I see the love there. The real, genuine love. And I'm glad for it. I'm glad she has a father who adores her, who will always show up for her, who will never let her doubt that she is wanted. But as for us, there's nothing left to rebuild. And strangely, I don't feel sad about it anymore. The sadness came and went like weather. It lived in my chest for months, heavy and constant. It woke me at night and followed me through my days. But slowly, imperceptibly, it began to lift. Not all at once, not in a dramatic moment of realization, but in the small ways that healing happens. In the mornings when I made coffee for one and didn't feel lonely, in the evenings when I put our daughter to bed and felt grateful instead of grieving, in the quiet realization that I was okay. Because love can survive many things. Stress. Time. Distance. Even pain, if both people are willing to carry it together. But not that moment. That moment when you're at your weakest, when you have just brought new life into the world, when your body and heart are both raw and open and vulnerable, and the person you trust the most chooses not to stand beside you. chooses doubt over faith, chooses suspicion over trust, chooses his fear over everything you built together. If there's one thing I learned from all of this, it's that some wounds don't scream. They don't explode. They don't announce themselves with drama or fanfare. They just quietly change everything. They shift the ground beneath your feet so gradually that you don't notice until you look up and realize you're standing somewhere else entirely. And sometimes that somewhere else is exactly where you need to be.